So let's break down some common stereotypes about countries. Oftentimes when you hear the name of a country such as Brazil, you would most likely think about either football or the famous Carnival celebrations. Or Australia, you think of having kangaroos or crocodiles everywhere. Or what about the Netherlands? Would you think about the flowers or the windmills? These are some of the stereotypes we will break down in countries, expectation versus reality. We will be breaking down some common stereotypes continent by continent. Today we shall start with North America. The first country we look at today is Canada. Now, when I ask you what is the capital of Canada, most people's expectation would be a big city like Toronto or Vancouver. But in reality, the capital city is Ottawa. It's a relatively big city in the French-speaking region of Quebec. Another stereotype that I said in a previous video was that Canada only borders the United States. But a few of you guys pointed out to me in the comments that Canada also borders Denmark. There's a little island called Hans Island in which Canada and Greenland, which is owned by Denmark, share half of the island. Also, one assumption in Canada is about the cold. Although Canada is the coldest country on average, it's not true that there's always snow in the summer. In fact, it can be very hot in Canada during summer.
My name is Joe Biden and I love ice cream.
All Canadians say A. The use of A is not as prevalent in everyday Canadian speech as the stereotype suggests. It's more of a cultural colloquialism that isn't used by all Canadians. Canadians live in igloos. This one is always funny, because as a kid I also used to think this was how Canadian people lived.
Bitch, are you dumb?
Canada is, however, a modern and developed country with cities and infrastructure similar to those in Western nations. Igloos are not typical housing for most Canadians. The final Canadian stereotype is that everyone is an ice hockey fan. Well, yes, ice hockey is the most popular sport, but not everyone loves it. Golf is also an extremely popular sport in Canada. The next country we look at is the USA. There are so many stereotypes regarding Americans. We will only look at a few though. Some people say that America itself is a country.
Why would you say that?
Fix it.
Why would you say that?
Even Americans themselves say it. But no, they are very wrong. America is the official term for both North and South America, not just the USA. The USA is in America, not America itself, just to be clear. Another people, including myself, like to make fun of is the fact that Americans are like empty-headed when it comes to geography.
Name 5 countries outside of North America.
Canada.
Outside of North America.
North America, Africa.
Africa is a continent.
Of course, we can conclude that these are just a few of the many Americans. Most of them are well-educated and do have knowledge about the world. Another assumption is that Americans can only speak English. Well, the USA has no official language, but English appears to be the most spoken. But in the more southern states closer to Mexico, you have a lot more people who speak Spanish. And by a lot, I don't mean that there is only like 1 million or 2 million. There are roughly 50 million Spanish speakers in the USA. To put that into comparison, Spain only has about 40 million Spanish speakers. And New York is an extremely lingually diverse city. There are lots and lots of languages spoken there, such as Chinese, French, English, you name a language, and there they probably speak it. The final US stereotype is that they are extremely patriotic. Well, if you're a foreigner traveling to the United States, then you will most likely be overwhelmed by the amount of US flags there. If you go on Google Maps and click on a random neighborhood, more likely than not you will find a US flag.
Two hours later.
If you're watching from the United States, what do you think? Is your country patriotic or not? For the third country, we go to the third biggest in North America, Mexico. So when you hear Mexico, what do you think of? Mexico is a large country with lots of various and beautiful landscapes, and this links on to our first stereotype. All of Mexico is a desert, and Mexicans just live in random deserts in the middle of nowhere. Movies always give us this stereotype. When we watch a movie and part of it is set in Mexico, they more often than not picture Mexico as just a large desert. This stereotype could also come from the dusty towns near the United States border. If you look at a picture of the Mexican border with San Diego, you will see that it looks very urban on the American side, and it looks quite dusty and desert-like on the Mexican side. However, some people completely forget the bigger cities in Mexico. For example, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. So this stereotype is not true. Another assumption that Mexicans get, particularly from the USA, is that they are all illegal immigrants. And from where do you think we get this stereotype? That's right, again, the movies, giving us another false sense of Mexico. There are millions of legal Mexicans in the United States. Not to say that there aren't none, because of course there will be some, but for the most part, most Mexicans are legal in the USA. And it's most likely now more than ever that this stereotype needs to be battled with. Another one is that every Mexican owns at least one poncho and at least one cowboy hat. This is a completely inaccurate stereotype, seeing as ponchos are far more common in Peru and cowboy hats are more likely to be worn by Texans. So if these are the given statistics, why is this a Mexican stereotype? Blame Hollywood for this stereotype about Mexico. Now, our final stop for this video is a trip to the Caribbean. I'm not really talking about one country in particular. These are just stereotypes for the Caribbean. The first one we look at, Jamaica is the only country in the Caribbean. Yes, it's a big country and in the Caribbean, but it's not just the only one. There are 13 countries in the Caribbean. And plus, it doesn't even have the biggest population. Cuba does. Cuba has 11 million people, compared to just 2.7 million Jamaicans. Another stereotype, again relating to Jamaica, is that people from the Caribbean sound Jamaican. Some countries have foreign accents which can sound very cool, but imagine you live in a Caribbean country, outside of Jamaica. Let's take Barbados for example. Imagine you are just walking down the street and get greeted with "Wagwan, mi brother."
Wagwan.
Different Caribbean countries have different creoles and dialects, so don't just assume they all talk like that. Another assumption is that reggae is the only music form in the Caribbean. Many Caribbean countries also have different types and tastes in music, although reggae is very popular. They get the stereotype mainly from Bob Marley. The country of Trinidad and Tobago has lots of different types of music on offer. Here are a list of some: calypso, steel pan, soca, limbo, and parang music. This island may be little, but it has lots to offer, although the islands outside of Jamaica and Trinidad are also very traditional with Caribbean music. The final stereotype that we shall cover in this video: everyone in the Caribbean is of African descent. Caribbean countries such as Trinidad and Tobago have a majority population that is of East Indian descent. What's also interesting is that more Caribbean countries are also starting to have a mixed ancestry, like Trinidad and Tobago. As of the African part, this probably dates back to when slavery was still a thing, and when slaves traveled to labor-free countries in the Caribbean and all over the world. And since there were slaves coming to the Caribbean, it gave them more opportunities for freedom and work opportunities. So back then there was a majority of Africans in the Caribbean, but now not so much. Nowadays most people in the Caribbean are not from African descent. So this was part 1 of our expectation versus reality or breaking down stereotypes series. In the next episode we will look at the continent of South America. Let us know in the comments, what countries would you like to see, or what stereotypes would you like us to break down? Whilst you are on your way down to comment, please do consider liking the video and subscribe to become one of the first 10,000 people to do so. Anyway, thank you for watching and see you in the next of Earth Basics.